Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Viking Academy podcast. So, this podcast is part two with Gina Mollicone-Long. Now, we go super deep into what her next adventure is. And so we talk about NLP, we talk about hypnosis, we talk about timeline therapy and all the work that she does in this area. And Gina has this wonderful approach to life. It's very pragmatic. It's very systemized. It's like, how do things work? And what she's going to be embarking on is she's doing a PhD in the UK to find the connection between science and spirituality. She believes that in the old teachings of just 200 years ago, like Sir Isaac Newton and so forth, there is actually proof there that they were already onto some technology that proves the connection between science and spirituality. So one of the things we talk about is that science is the how. Science tells us how things work. Spirituality is about why things work. She believes she can find the cross. She's looking for the crossover. That is her thesis, that there's a crossover between science and spirituality, two separate systems, the how and the why. When they come together, you get the wow. We go really deep on that and all the other teachings that she has. I hope you find it incredibly powerful as I did. This is going to be another one of those podcasts that I'm going to personally listen to probably 2 or 3 times myself, because she packs in so much information about who we are and how our programming works and what we can do personally to change things. So if shit's happening in your life, like it is happening to me right now as I'm recording this podcast, I'm in this mushy chrysalis state, like the painful part of shifting from a caterpillar to a butterfly. If you're going through kind of a shitty part, and a lot of people are right now, there's a lot of gems in this podcast to help you see how to break through so that you can become that butterfly, so you can soar, so you can change the past conditioning you had in yourself so that you can live your best life and live with passion and purpose, which is what the Viking Academy is all about. So there you go. So let's get into the podcast. Let's go explore. Welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you.
So you and I had a conversation after the last podcast.
Yep.
And went for dinner. It was fantastic dinner, by the way.
Yep.
Awesome.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it was very good. A very great conversation. You are going on a journey. You're going on an epic adventure. Tell me what the status is of that right now.
So I'll be going to Oxford to do my PhD in theology, science and religion. And yeah, that's what I'm up to. So, it's really just a further exploration at the academic level of the intersection of mind and matter, spirit and matter, if you will.
You make it sound so nonchalant.
It kind of
like,
is.
No, it's kind of not. It's kind of not. It's kind of a big deal. Like when you told me what you were doing, I was like, holy shit. Never mind that. Like, okay, there's a lot of things to unpack into this. So there's we're just going to pack up and sell off and move to England.
We do that often. So that's not
do that. Okay. But still, you're doing that. You're packing up, heading to England, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you had to put in a application, didn't you?
Of course, I had to put in a proposal.
A proposal. Could you explain that a little bit more for the listeners? Because they like me probably don't understand what we're talking about here.
Well, so PhD is research. It's a research-based PhD. So you have to put in a proposal of what you want to research. But again, for those of you listening who are shocked at the relationship between science and religion, I just want to kind of point out that they're both just systems of information. They're systems of organization of information. And so I'm less concerned with who's right and more concerned with what's the same, because I believe that what's the same inside those systems of information informs the others on how to maybe progress through what the tricky questions are, right? So they always say science explains how and religion explains why. I don't know if that's true, but that's sort of the, the easy explanation. So, and there are a lot of people that hold those things so totally separate, and that's fine. And there are a lot of us who hold them totally integrated. And so I'm just going to try to find the intersections that would serve us in our current search for truth and meaning and whatnot.
Yeah, and that's I still find it so funny how you just kind of nonchalantly say, I'm just trying to connect these two,
Right.
which have been traditionally opposing views. You're either like my daughter Isla, she loves you ever watched Young Sheldon?
Yes.
Okay. She is all of a sudden, Isla's 12. She has gone bonkers over this. She watches it almost daily. She's watched the whole series and then she watches it again over and over. But at all the same time, when she's watching any TV, she's knitting or making crafts. She's like this multitasking phenom. Anyways, I'm watching this, and of course, the big conflict in the show is Sheldon Cooper, and he's like Mr. Science, and his mother, who is all about the traditional gospel of Jesus, and it's that clash between the two, and it's a historical clash that's been going on for a long time. When you first told me that you were going to do your PhD to find the connection between the two, that's when I was like, this is epic. But that's just the kind of the high level view of it. Tell the listeners what you're actually going to analyze to find that connection.
So, I mean, this could change. So,
Okay.
so I don't want to get into too many details because we're not there yet. Call me in a year and I'll tell
Okay.
you what exactly that we're doing. But we're trying to excavate understanding that was potentially present in theological writings that nobody really recognized as being scientific because that science didn't exist at the time. So, as an example, and this usually shocks people, everybody knows who Newton is, but nobody realizes that Isaac Newton himself didn't have access to use the word energy the way we do, kinetic, potential, and so on and so forth, because his physics made the discovery of those kinetic, potential, and so on energy possible, but they weren't available as in vocabulary or vernacular understanding during his time. So he could never have written about, the energetic connection of blah, 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 because that wasn't even a thing. Right. So he would, but that doesn't mean that that there was no such thing as potential energy, or that our science didn't know it at the time. And so if we go with what we know now back to what was written then, we might also find other principles that were already, there that they couldn't explain in ways we would understand because they didn't have access to the language, the understandings, and things like that. So because of that, we can look back in historical writings that potentially show us other insights that got missed until the scientific understanding emerges. And then it's like, oh, well, wait a second. This writing from the 16th century or 17th century or 18th century, while it's cloaked in perhaps a little bit more theological talk or whatever, looks a lot like the description of, say, for example, neuroplasticity. But that wasn't a word, obviously, in the 17th century or 18th century. So they might have written about it as, information. Even information would have been a questionable word. So we have to look, so we can look back and see that the things that we think are scientific breakthroughs may have been already there simmering in consciousness, just without a vehicle to be put into. Like, even, for example, Newton himself had to invent calculus, like the stuff we all take in high school. He had to invent it as a math type to be able to explain what he was talking about with gravity and optics. Like, it did,
because he conceptually understood gravity, but
and
he
optics.
didn't have a way of conveying the messaging. So then he actually created something to like a translator. So
Almost.
yeah, when you think about it, like calculus was the translator to explain his understanding, his concept
I
of
guess the point is that
gravity. Yeah.
he while he knew it, in order to publish it, he need to corroborate it in a way that was understandable, replicatable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's all kinds of unpublished writings by people like Newton and whatnot. They were never published. They were never made into books or laws or whatever. But that doesn't mean that what they wrote wasn't valuable. And so people like me, we look at, from our understanding of current scientific advancement, were there clues already 400 years ago, 300 years ago? And if so, what else might they be cluing onto that we could now a little bit take for granted, right? So, for example, 25, 30 years ago, if you had told someone that you had a near-death experience, they'd put you in the cuckoo category, right? If you,
yeah.
well, they would. They'd be like,
yeah.
oh, okay, whatever, right? And now, because we can look at these states in a neuroscience manner and identify some of the states or the chemicals, or, we can start to pick apart how it might be working. It's a little bit less cuckoo category and a little bit more understandable and explicable. And so the scientific writer, the scientific fiction writer, Arthur C. Clarke, one of his idioms or axioms was that any sufficiently advanced form of technology is indistinguishable from magic. Okay.
Yes.
Big, important thing there. And I've been saying this for decades. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean there's not a technology or a technique, which is the Greek word for process or steps. Doesn't mean there isn't steps there. You just don't know what they are. And so it looks like magic. I mean, if you've ever seen an actual stage magician do a magic trick, it looks amazing. And then if they teach you how they do it, you're like, oh, well, that's kind of boring, right? And because once you know the trick, if you will, it ceases to be mystical, and therefore the entertainment, which is in the mysticism, is gone. Well, that's kind of the same way with our mechanical world, right? So once we get to the point where a near-death experience is completely explicable, anybody who has one will just be like, oh, that's regular, right? Because we understand it. And until we understand it, we'll be like, oh no, that's weird or mystical or magical or whatever. And people always think that magic is some sort of like out there, standalone supernatural bag of tricks, where, I mean, I always use the example of my grandmother. When I wrote The Secret of Successful Failing, and if I were to say, my grandmother lived to be 97. Okay. But my grandmother never had an email address. She never had a cell phone. She had a landline, and that was a big deal, right? She was born in the 19 teens, early 1920s. So she had, think about the technology that she had to adopt over time, but cell phones weren't one of them. Now imagine when I wrote The Secret of Successful Failing, or even Think or Sink, and I turned to her and I go, Bobby, I want to get you a copy of my book. And then I pull out this weird device, right? Mm-hmm. And I tap on it 3 specific times, and tap, tap, tap. And then I put it back down. And then, sometime later, the book appears from nowhere and someone hands it to me, right? Well, from her perspective, like, that's like get out the garlic or the cross, because I just conjured up a book out of nowhere, right? I spoke a spell of, Bobby, I want to give you this book, The Secret of Successful Failing. I pulled out a magical device that she didn't understand. I did a very specific sequence of steps, and then the book appeared as if from nowhere. Well, for her, that's magic. For me, that's just Amazon, which is magical in its effects, to get me stuff to my house that I don't have to go out in the pouring, freezing rain to do it. But the bottom line is it's not magic. It's just a step a simple, supply chain delivery system. But because she doesn't know the technology, doesn't understand it, and doesn't use it, it looks like magic. Well, that is the basis of everything that I do, literally. Right. And so for example, if you are on my coaching page, right? So what the breakthrough work that I do, what sets people will say, well, what's the difference between this and all our coaching? Well, first of all, it takes 2 days instead of 2 years or whatever painful process people are in. And secondly, it occurs when people recognize that they are more energy than matter. The biggest mistake people make is they try to make changes in the material world, right? And while it can work, it's a lot of effort to make changes. But if you go back to the blueprint, the energetic world, the world that's a little unseen, a little unformed, and you make changes there, that flows right through to your world, to your material world. And that's where we work, right? We work in the thoughts, the focus, the emotions, the physiology. These are all upstream of action, result. So, but it's not, it looks magical, sure, to the untrained eye. I just taught hypnosis trainers training. People are always like, whoa. It's like, really? Like hypnosis, of all the things I know, it's the most basic. It's because it's so old that so many people understand it, that it can be used by virtually anyone. And it is, just so we're clear, right? That, is it you're not learning it because someone told you not to? Well, that's like kind of why I want to learn things usually, when someone tells me not to, right?
Yeah.
But like, whoa, it's weird. I'm like, well, hypnosis is just a process of following instructions when you know you don't have to. So it's like, I know I don't have to follow your instructions, but if I do, I pretend like I am following your instructions. That opens the door to hypnosis, which is being suggestible, right? Well, why would you want to do that? Well, if you wanted to believe something that you don't currently believe that would support your goals, that would be a reason to do it. Or if you wanted to do something differently that you couldn't seem to get conscious control of, that would be a reason to do it. And remember, well, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to do that. Well, have you ever watched a television? They go, yeah. If you're watching this on a video right now, you're looking at a screen. That screen is flashing at some bit rate that's moving very quickly. Your brain is smoothing that over so that you see an image that's processable, right? So your daughter's watching Young Sheldon on a screen, but that TV, the flash rate of that television induces in the brain slower brain waves. That's called a trance. If it hits low alpha, now you're in a trance state. Well, I don't think anybody can argue with that, right? Have you ever seen anybody watching television?
Yeah, big wide open mouth. That's me.
We literally say they look tranced out, right? Okay, well, that's not hypnosis, but that's the beginning. That's required. You have to be in that sort of slower state. And then you have to bypass your critical faculty. And then once you do that, you become suggestible in the context. Well, the bypass of the critical faculty. So the critical faculty is the part of your mind, if you will, that cares to distinguish between reality and fantasy, right? So is it real? Is it real? Is it real? Is that true? Is that true? Is that true? And it's there, and it forms around age 7. And then we're kind of stuck with the critical faculty for life. But it's very easy to get around the critical faculty. If you're watching a movie, for example, and in the movie, something unrealistic happens, Superman flies away or whatever. There's the two guys are fighting in midair, whatever, something that doesn't occur, every day. The critical faculty goes like, wait a second, hold on, this isn't real. And then it goes, oh, you know what? We're watching a movie. It's good. Go ahead. And so what happens is that relaxes the critical faculty. It goes, oh, all right, we're good. It's for the purposes of entertainment, but it doesn't matter why. You've now bypassed the critical faculty, and guess whose brain is wide open and ready for suggestion? Okay. Now, anybody who works in advertising, and I worked in advertising for years, knows this, or if they don't know it, they're going to learn it right now, that advertising is basically applied hypnosis. People are in a trance. Okay. They're in a trance because the TV kind of does half the work. And then the show does the rest of the work in providing you something that causes you to bypass your critical faculty, right? And it doesn't have to be sensational like Superman flying. I mean, think about it. When you saw Superman flying, it's not like you got up in the movie theater and whipped a tomato at the screen. You're like, oh, this is bullshit. Men can't fly. I'm leaving, right? Well, that the fact that you don't abreact like that is because you override the critical faculty, which is willful. I know you're not signing a document, but you're still doing it. Okay. And then that's my time to advertise to you. Right. So back in the 50s, when we started to learn the application of this, the commercials were kind of brutal, right? Like, buy my washing powder. Like, it was just, now we're so sophisticated because the more and more we can hone in on this mechanism, right? So now it doesn't even take men flying. It could be something as insane as, in a movie, let's say a character is in Seattle and you can tell because the Space Needle is showing out the window of their office or something. Okay. So they're on the phone and they're talking to another character who's clearly in New York City because you can see the Empire State Building or something. Okay. So by virtue of the fact that you can tell where they are, one's in Seattle and one's in New York. Okay. You know that they're, across the country. And then in the next scene, they go on the phone, they go, you know what, I really like to meet you. Okay, let's do that. And then in the next scene, you see them walking hand in hand in Central Park. Okay. Now, think about that. Does anybody stand up in that movie theater and go, well, this is ridiculous. It would take at least 5 hours to fly from Seattle to New York. And that's not including the time you have to get there extra for security and check your bags and and find the gate. So we're talking 7 hours, plus you have to pick up your bag at the other end. And then what if it's delayed? Then you have to get a taxi. Then you have to go to, so, I mean, this should take 8 hours and it only took 1.2 seconds. Well, this is ridiculous. I want my money back. Well, nobody does that. You go, oh, I get it. It's a movie. It's not real. And so you willfully suspend or bypass the critical faculty. And at that exact second, and anybody who doesn't know this, who works in advertising, this is some free information for you. That's the exact second to put the logo or the product placement of the thing that you're trying to promote using the media that you've purchased. That's hypnosis. I'm sorry to burst all the bubbles, and everybody goes, that's not hypnosis. Hypnosis is this evil thing. And where did you hear that? Oh, well, the person in position of authority told me that it's this or that. I go, well, if I had to hide a secret, I would put it in plain view and then discredit it from a position of authority. So we can sit here and debate it, but I can tell you how the mechanism works in your physiology. Now, we could also sit here and do what a lot of people do and focus on that. Well, they should be doing that. That's wrong. Who cares? Listen, this is how it works. Here's how you use it. What do you mean? Here's how I use it. Well, it works whether we're trying to sell you, I don't know, washing powder or toothpaste or whatever. But what if what you're trying to do is sell yourself a new mindset, a new belief, or replace a limiting belief, or a new paradigm where you don't need to inhale tar or whatever. Okay, so it's the same thing. It's the same mechanism. Well, wait a second, Gina. I can't obviously afford to buy media on television. So what do I do? Well, you don't need to buy media on television. You can do this in the comfort of your own home, right? And that's what hypnosis in its traditional form, which is have someone read you an induction script, which is what climbs over the critical faculty in your own brain, and it relaxes you, and that brings you into that state. And then you pretend like you're following their instructions when you don't have to, which is kind of what you do when you watch the movie. And when you get to that hypnotic state and then you start accepting the selective thinking, well, that's hypnosis. And we just use the same mechanism, but we did it for your benefit instead of without your explicit consent, which, by the way, isn't required. Just your implicit consent is required. And how do we achieve that in a classroom or a setting? We read a script and you follow it. And if you follow it, then you give your implicit consent. It's the same mechanism. So I don't like to get too much into these guys are the bad guys and the good guys, because honestly, my study of history has shown me that it's not exactly as you always think it is.
No,
right? The bad guys were the good guys, were the bad guys were the good guys, and usually it's the one who wins that tells you who is who.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
I don't spend too much time worrying about that, but I will tell you how the mechanism works. And it looks like magic. And if you're not trained, you might get out the garlic or the cross or the, devil horns or whatever. But when I teach the technology, which is kind of a yawner, really, it's not I teach way more complicated stuff than hypnosis. People are shocked at how simple it is. I just taught the highest level of hypnosis that you can teach. I certified a master trainer. Okay. That's the highest level you can teach. And there was one flip chart for the entire training. And I am like famous for like my flip charts. And there's one in hypnosis. There's one flip chart. It's basic, simple, and you have to understand this in order to understand how the mind works. And this is only hypnosis from a physiological perspective. And by physiology, I mean, now we have words like brainwave and slow alpha, and right, we have these words now. Okay, we have those. We can verify them. I have a device I can hook up to my ear and measure it in my house. But 200 years ago, they didn't have any of that. It still worked, by the way. But they thought maybe it was a little bit more, I have power. Oh, I have power over you, but you don't actually, right? But they didn't have any of the words. So now when I teach it to people, they're like, seriously, that's all it is?
You know, it's curious. It's interesting. I was just down in Santa Monica for a coaching session, a couple workshops down there. And I met up with a buddy of mine that I went to school with a long time ago. He's a film producer he lives down in Ventura. Great guy. His parents were always, shall we call it, they were more hippies / woo-woo, what we called woo-woo at the time. I was talking to him about my hypnosis session with Nikki Hughes, and which I did a podcast with Nikki, and I was explaining how I did a regression therapy. So we did a regression, we did a past life regression, and we did a spiritual regression.
Yeah.
And he's looking at me going, "Really, really, Eric? Is that so? Like, tell me about this hypnosis thing." I thought for sure he would have gone, "Oh, that's really cool." He was actually going, "Yeah, right, whatever." And I was going, dude, have you ever seen The Man They Call Ravine? Don't you remember the show that he would go around to towns and he would make people go on stage and dance? And he was just like, yeah, no, that hypnosis stuff doesn't work. It's not real. And I'm like, oh my God, it is so real. I said, but it's not someone comes up to you and goes, woo, and I can control their thoughts without their consent. And I like how you said that.
But see, it doesn't have to be explicit, and that's part people don't understand.
Yeah.
If it's explicit, like in a hypnosis session, it's very explicit down to the point where you're signing a consent form and blah blah. But even then, if they say take a breath and close your eyes, but you do close your eyes and take a breath, you've just interfered with the instructions. And any interference just kind of keeps a level of critical faculty in place, and then that's fine. It does have a protective feature so that you don't just believe everything you hear, right? But that being said, people will always ask me, well, why didn't hypnosis work? I tried to do it for my problem, quit smoke, whatever it is, quit smoking, lose weight, make money, whatever.
Yeah.
And the issue is that hypnosis is more of a technique for planting ideas. There's a movie called Inception with DiCaprio in it. And it's literally a movie about whoever wrote that is clearly a hypnotist of some kind. But hypnosis is an excellent tool if what you're doing is trying to plant an idea. Okay. Because then it goes in to the unconscious mind as deeply as you will kind of give it access to, and then it kind of grows. That's what inception means, that it grows, right? The problem is that, if it were that simple, we'd all just do it and we'd have what we want, but there tends to be stuff in the way. So if you think of it like planting seeds, if I plant seeds in a junkyard full of, roots and rocks and spare tires and whatever, and I plant a seed there and I never water it and it might grow, but it probably won't. And so that's why we don't teach it in isolation. We teach it with other tools that come at the mind from different perspectives, and the two other sort of legs of the mind, if you will. So hypnosis is very physiological, and we also come at these mind mechanics from a mental processes, so our thinking processes, And that we use NLP, same idea, different tools, different processes. And then we also come at the emotional processes using a technique called timeline therapy, which allows us to remove the limiting emotions and the negative emotions and the limiting beliefs that usually are sitting somewhere in your construct. And if we remove those first, then hypnosis is extremely effective at sort of planting the seeds.
So this reminds, so we had done, I had done a session with Nikki first. The two of you cross over quite a bit in terms of this. I talked about the blast therapy she did with this and bilateral.
Cool.
I always forget exactly what the acronym stands for, but we actually worked through some blockages first, similar to that, before I did the hypnotherapy, before I did the regressions. So it was like getting these blockages out of the way so that I had nothing kind of stopping me from getting in there.
I use the planting a seed analogy more than any other analogy. You know, a client will come to me and say, I want an English garden. I go, well, what kind of garden you have? And they're like, oh, geez, you know, there's rocks and weeds, and I got like a junkyard, you know, and and a fence, and you know, okay, well, we first got to remove all that, because you can't plant an English garden on top of your junkyard. So you got to remove all those things. Then you can plant your seeds. But then even that, most coaches are like, oh, I planted the seeds, we're good. No, now the real work begins. Now you got to water it and weed it. And if another weed should show up, you got to know, you got to be at cause for taking the weed away. And you got to, you know, use the hoe and the fertilizer and the blah, 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 blah. Like you have to cultivate it until it's the norm. And that is also where most coaches have no concept of how they enable their clients, and their clients are the ones who have to do it. It's like, if you ever watch a good coach, they should be seated during the game. They can't play the game.
Mm-hmm.
They've done their work. The players have to play. I mean, if at that point you're still teaching them fundamentals, you haven't really done your job, right? If they're performing, you're not performing. So coaches who stand there and scream at their players, well, that's insane. They don't have the skills they need to perform. Now you could take stock and maybe make minor adjustments, and perhaps in the next practice go, okay, we got to work on our shooting. But when they're performing, like, think about it. When you're performing, if you were on a stage performing, imagine if someone was barking at you in the middle of you trying to bring your best performance. I mean, it's insane, right? So most coaches don't realize that the first job is to teach the skill correctly. And then the second job is to make sure it integrates as the norm. And again, most coaches don't understand how the technology works, you know, and it's not that I think that the things that we teach are the only things. Listen, anything with steps will work. If someone can give you the steps to do something and it's produced the result, it will work. If it's worked on one person, it can work on all people. So if it's not working, then the person's not prepared. They're not willing, right? They don't have the desire to break the old habit, because that's common. You say you do, but you don't really. Or they're not willing to follow the instructions. You know, if you go back to that hypnotist example you gave of the stage hypnotist, stage hypnotists are looking for people who go into deepest trance, and in a room full of 100 people cold, 20 will go into a light, 60 into a medium, and 20 into a deep. So they're trying to find the deep, people who just naturally go deep. And then they're trying to find the extroverts. And if you find an extrovert in a deep trance, you got yourself a great stage show.
That would be me.
Right?
I was one of the ones that was on the stage with Ravine dancing like a total ass. It was, yeah. Oh yeah.
He was, the suggestions were real, and he was kind of operating your machinery, if you will, but it's because you let him. It's not because
yeah, completely. Because I remember breaking the trance. I broke the hypnosis halfway through, and when I was in my seats, and I stayed there. I felt horrible afterwards because I kind of knocked myself out of it.
Well, you can take yourself out of it anytime. That's the beauty of the
yeah. So let's that was wow. There was so much to unpack and digest there, and thank you so much for that. My synapses were firing all over the place as you were sharing. So that the thing that you're doing now is you're going back to find that cutting edge between spiritual. So you see spirituality and science, they're the same, they're systems. They're systems, and they just haven't been able to, we haven't been able to have them talk to one another. And you're looking for that bridge that brings them across, so people start seeing that. Because when we talk about religion and the spirituality, it seems like magic, like that what you just explained. It's like
Right.
magic and woo woo. I call it the woo woo space and the
Yeah.
rest of it. But the more we're understanding the way the process works, or the steps required to make things happen, like hypnosis, it starts to bring the two together. So they're not separate systems. They're just like,
Different
what?
languages.
How would you articulate that?
Well, they are separate systems.
Yeah.
But in the same way that a language, two languages are separate systems, but they have rules.
Yes.
And when you know the rules of a language, then you can communicate with someone. It's the same thing with, so religion can only offer us an explanatory value insofar as the system can explain what's happening, and that the person listening to the explanation accepts, God did it in some form of variation. Now, any kid who's been 3 years old has probably said, well, who's God? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you got a bunch of scientists trying to either prove or disprove that. Maybe one day they'll be able to identify it, and then a bunch of people who are on the fence will be like, oh, that's all it is? Oh, okay, well, I can get on board with that. But then so what it does is, when you bring the two together, you get kind of access to their strengths, right? So if you, I'm trying to think of a good example. So, let's just say hundreds of years ago, if religion was your main system, and you didn't understand why you shouldn't marry your brother, right? But God said so. So you didn't, because religion said so. Okay. Because God said so in some form or another, somewhere in your religious belief, that was wrong. Okay. But then science comes along and starts to show, well, here's the reason, the DNA this and the DNA that. And if you marry your brother, your DNA is going to corrupt, and then you're going to end up with a faulty chromosome, blah, 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 whatever science says about that. Then it doesn't matter if God said so or the DNA proof is real. In either case, they're saying the same thing.
Yes.
You with me?
Right. Yeah.
So that sort of analogy exists between the systems, right? So science says this, and then it gets to a point, and then it's like, well, just because, and then it can't get any further. But what I think is that sometimes that because is also written in the other system in a more poetic language, a little bit more metaphorical or whatever. And then the because is there. And it's like, well, the because is there and the because is there, and nobody's been able to pinpoint it. Maybe we can find it now that we've found the fact that they're both kind of saying the same thing.
They're both warning you not to marry your
they're both
like, it's just
saying the same thing. And religion and science do this over and over and over again, right? So the problem is when you go, this one is true and that one is false, that's baloney. That's fine, but we have a phrase for that, and it's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
So you have the thing that struck me when we talked, and you've alluded to part of it in your explanation, and it's fascinating when I look back on philosophical teachings, spiritual teachings, teachings of so-called scientists back in the day. You start looking at Alfred Adler, Adler and all these ones, and then you realize they crossed over this psychology into philosophy. There was always that crossover that happened. I am curious to see where, when they were explaining something, like you've kind of said this, let's say Newton has said something and he had a concept of it, but we didn't have any way of interpreting what he said back then because that didn't exist yet. So it was
Right.
like, it's this voodoo. And so I'm seeing kind of this resurgence also in Jordan Peterson does this when he's going back through the scriptures and he's trying to find the patterns psychologically why we follow these things, and his concept of sacrifice, which is your sacrifice. It's the whole New Testament. It's all about sacrifice, right? That's the thing you're doing. And he said, that's the reason why religion was saying this is what you do because God said it. But when we look at it from a sociological standpoint, the reason why you sacrifice something for yourself is to help the greater good. Why are you helping the greater good? Because that helps us survive, because we're still a bunch of pack animals on the Sahara. Like I look at the condition, we've been conditioned so over, and basically everything we do is to propagate the species and to survive. It's all about survival. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I was doing a session yesterday, a breathwork session. Dan said, the reptilian part of your brain is basically going, can I eat this thing or can it eat me? That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. There's not a lot of like contemplative thought, right? That's all the front of the brain. And so it's not, for me, it's not either or, and it's not, they're the same. They're different systems that they offer. How do I put this? So breakthrough. So in my reality, the work I do with like an individual person, a private client, would be a curated breakthrough. Take them, deconstruct, reconstruct, right? Pull out all the weeds, plant all the new seeds, put the tasking in place so that becomes the norm. So that breakthrough occurs because the premise that we're working on is that we're going to work with the person in the most intangible part of them that's still part of them, right? It's like we're going to work as far upstream as we can, and then that's going to kind of have a wave through their whole being. But the breakthrough occurs because of that intersection. Well, what I think is if there was a way to look at theological writings, concepts, proposals, theories, with a current understanding of science. So I am from the first century, right? So even though I was born in the late 1900s, so I can, with my knowledge of the scientific ways of the world, right? So I understand thermodynamics and I understand entropy and whatever, because I have an engineering degree and I read, I have a rudimentary understanding of neuroscience. So I understand these things. I've read the studies. I understand a little bit about the non-magical science part of it, right? I get it a little bit. Now, with that brain, I can go back and read ancient writings who didn't know anything about this stuff. But in their writings, I could recognize, geez, that looks like this person who's writing this is trying to explain what we would now take for granted as neuroplasticity. We would just take it for granted.
And just explain for the listeners what you mean by neuroplasticity.
So the brain's ability to so if the brain gets damaged in any way, it is capable of relearning the behavior using a different part of the brain, using different neural networks. So this is,
if you have a stroke,
you
get stroke and part of the brain dies, but then the brain has this plasticity to work around it.
It doesn't just happen. Well, it could happen spontaneously, but through, the right physio and the right processes, you could learn to walk again, learn to talk again, recover your motor function, and so on and so forth. And that's called neuroplasticity. Well, we take it for granted now, but 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, that was not a thing. But the brain still had the ability. Do you understand?
The brain was still doing it back then, whether we believe. Oh, hold on. So it's still happening whether you believe it or not.
Exactly. And
it's like it's still happening whether you believe it. Yeah, we just didn't understand it. And so how much of so this is interesting. This is
so like the hypnotists of yore.
Yeah.
Looked like they had power, right? And mesmerism, which is a very specific type of, it's actually a little bit more like Reiki and a little bit less like hypnosis, but it gets thrown in the hypnosis category, would have looked like magic. Pass over somebody for 3 hours and then all of a sudden you can just make suggestions and there's no pain and you can do a surgery, and it's insane based on our current understanding of surgery and whatever. But they didn't have anesthetic back then, and they still had to do the surgeries. So they found a way to go around the pain. But now, if you study it, you'd be more likely to go, they seem to be interfering with the electromagnetic field, which carries information in a body, and maybe they're somehow interrupting the pain signal. Maybe we should devise an experiment to see if that's what's happening. I'm making this up now. This, by the way, isn't necessarily true, but it's kind of a good research project.
I like it. It's a good story.
Right?
I'm keep going.
Right. But now, because of our understanding of the electromagnetic field of the body, information flow through electromagnetic fields and so on and so on and so forth, we might be able to easily explain what Mesmer was doing in the 1700s, and it wouldn't have been weird at all. And he never would have been on trial by committee for being a charlatan. Maybe he would have been heralded as being a genius for figuring out the EMF transfer of information on the surface of the body back in the 1700s when we didn't, you know what I mean? But so instead we threw him in jail, which is what we tend to do with people like that. Well, we didn't really throw him in jail. We just punted him back to Austria. But and so
or we crucify them, or
whatever.
we sentence them to death, right? We crucified Jesus. They sentenced Socrates to death. That was a story that I didn't realize, that Socrates actually.
Well, he wasn't like opposed to it. He was like, I'm kind of done with this place.
Well, no, the research I did on it, he was talking to his Diamandus or Diamand, I can't remember the word was again, but he's always consulting his inner voice, and his inner voice told him, nope, it's okay. Let him
drink the hemlock.
Go for it. Drink it, go away. But here's the thing is that humans, we seem to fear that which we don't understand.
Right.
And how much, like when you look back on the past and you go, oh my gosh, look at how stupid we were back then.
Right.
Well, hello, how stupid are we right now?
Exactly.
Lots.
100%.
Like more than we can.
Right. I mean, people will literally say to me, hypnosis is bullshit. And then I'll say, well, in our culture, in our current modern culture, the more something costs, the more value we think it has, right? The more something costs, the more value we think it has. There's a big difference between, a real Gucci purse and a Gucky purse you bought on Canal Street in New York City, right? So the more it costs, the more value. I'm not saying that's true, but that's the construct we live in right now. Well, a Super Bowl ad, when I worked at P&G in advertising, was $1 million for 30 seconds, and that was in the 1990s. So it's got to be 5 to 10 million now, just based on inflation. Well, if something costs, let's just say $5 million for 30 seconds, I would say it was a pretty valuable media buy. Like, we weren't even allowed to buy Super Bowl spots on the brands that I worked on because we weren't big enough, right? We couldn't blow our whole media budget on one football game. And so that means that those spots are very valuable. Well, I mean, I think I heard now that, it's got 2 billion eyeballs. So what would you pay for 2 billion eyeballs? That's a lot of eyeballs. So that's valuable. But I just told you that the value is because I've got 2 billion eyeballs in a trance, and I've got them on the edge of their seat, right? So we're watching a game that's not really real, but we seem to care like it's real. And we broke for a commercial at the most suspenseful part of the game, right? And so we're stuck, and that also suspends the critical faculty. And then during that commercial break, I'm selling you my whatever. Well, that's hypnosis. So we could sit here and debate whether that's good, bad, right, or wrong, but now we're having a debate about capitalism. We're not having a debate about hypnosis anymore. I don't give a crap what people do with the technology. What I'm here to tell you is how the technology works. Now you could use it for yourself, right? And then you could use it to believe more, or, sleep better, or whatever. Okay. But you're doing it on purpose, but the mechanism doesn't work more because the reason you're using it is more virtuous to you. The mechanism doesn't care who's using it.
Right. It reminds me of the impersonal life. The impersonal it's life isn't, it's not personal.
No,
it's not personal.
There's no guideline of truth out here commentating what's happening in your life. That is all taking place in
yeah,
here.
exactly. It's this
Now,
whole
the paradox is that it doesn't matter. It's not true, but without meaning, your life has no purpose. So you assign meaning, and then that gives you direction.
right.
But it's assigned. And so we keep assigning crappy meaning, right? Instead of recognizing there's no inherent meaning in this. So instead of making it mean whatever's taken me out, why don't I make it mean something awesome?
What I wanted to mean, and that's where I see the ethos of the Viking Academy, which is like, go explore yourself and live with passion and purpose. Like, but what's your purpose? Go figure that out. Like, it's up to you. You know what I mean? Like, it's a decision that you ultimately make for yourself, because everything's happening and then you imply the meaning upon it. You imply that. And so really the quality of my life is basically directly proportional to the quality of my thinking.
Yep. And what if your thinking's missing a few key beliefs? Enter hypnosis. You know what I mean? What if your thinking is prevented by a negative emotion that you have been hanging on to since 1979? Enter timeline therapy. Like, these are, it would be, if you came up to me and said, oh yeah, in 1998, I got the newest version of Microsoft Office and it blew my mind. In 1998, I could have multiple windows open. I could edit a document and copy from that document to the spreadsheet. It changed my life so much so that I refuse to run any other program to this day. I'd be like, are you high? Like, it was the best program in 1998, but 40 years later, it's been upgraded. But if you are basing your now based on something that worked in 1998, I'm going to give you a clue. The program's out of date. And you would think a person who is doing that is insane. I mean, look at somebody who has, like, I don't know, an old iPhone that can no longer be updated. Like, my mom had an iPhone 6 and she used to refuse. I'm not updating it anymore. And I'm like, Mom, it's out of date. I don't care. It still works. It's still the phone. I can still text people. I don't need anything other than that. But you can't run the new. I don't need the new, right? Like, can you imagine? But and then if she were to come to me and be like, I can't get my plane ticket, well, because you need the new. No. I got the best version from 2000. We're crazy. You people come to me and they go, oh, this part of my life's not working. I go, well, you're running a program from 1981. Oh, well, yeah, but it's who I am. No, it's who you were in 1981. But you're not that person anymore.
And I think all of humanity needs a major, like, we need an upgrade, or like a consciousness upgrade. I see us running on, I've been able to see this. You've articulated it better than me, but it's that we're running on old programming.
That's
like,
it.
We're just running.
Judgmental.
You know what I mean? It's old programming. Because I look at it and go, where is my thinking today not serving me? And ultimately, if it's not serving me today, then the thinking is from old programming. And why am I holding on to the old thinking? And the only thing I can think about why I would hold on to old thinking is somehow that old thinking is giving me security of some sort, giving me a huggy blanket of something to hold on to of a past, or it's been some trauma that's locked in me.
Well,
but it's got to serve me somehow. But even though it's not serving me what I want today, but somehow deep down, it must be serving something. Do you know what I'm getting at? Like,
it just worked at the time.
It worked at the time and it doesn't work anymore.
And it's not appropriate for the current circumstances.
Then why are we, but there's my question. So why do people hold on to their why is your mom so
they don't know
about keeping her old programming?
They don't know. My mom, so they don't know. So if you talk to us, so we have a lot of older people in our lives right now, and they don't understand that. So for example, it's for you and me to use, for when I use this phone, okay, I understand what an app is, right? But I'm clear that it's an application on the platform of the phone. But for somebody who's older and didn't grow up with this and has had to adopt this technology, they treat it like a computer. And so they don't understand the difference between, say, for example, being on the app of the company versus being on the website of the company. Okay. And so they don't know how it works. They just don't know. And so what motivation is there to upgrade anything when they don't even know there's a thing to upgrade? It's just a device. I can get my email on it or whatever, and it works fine until they go to the website and the website doesn't give them what they need, but they don't have the app and they don't understand the difference between the, like, they don't even know. And so because they don't know, what's there to upgrade? If you don't know there's something to upgrade, you don't upgrade it.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we teach people, listen, you are not your programs. Your programmed responses are the body's way of being efficient and predictable. So if in 1982 you created a program that got you out of trouble with your friends, or got you from, prevented you from getting the shit kicked out of you in the schoolyard or whatever, it worked. And so your brain was like, ooh, file this, do this every time we go to the schoolyard, or do this every time we talk to a friend. This thing worked. The problem is now that, it's 40 years later and you're trying to talk to a new friend and your brain's running the old program and it's having the old program's effects and it's interfering with the current relationship. You don't even know it's a choice. You just think it's how you are, but it's not how you are. It's how you programmed yourself. And there's nothing wrong with the way you programmed yourself unless it's not working anymore. Then if it's not working anymore, it will show up like a problem. And then if it shows up like a problem, you just reprogram the behavior.
Here's a question on the personal side. Would you describe yourself as more of the how versus the why of life? Like how life works?
Well, here, I'll give you that. I'll answer that with the way,
you know what I
I'll
mean?
answer that with the way you started this podcast. So religion tells us why and science tells us how. And I'm going to do a PhD in the intersection of why and how.
There you go. So you're a why how girl.
I'm a wow.
You're a wow. Yes, you're very much a wow. Very much so.
Right. So and again, I'm when you
you got to trademark that. You know that.
Sure. I'll trademark the word wow.
No. You got to trademark that.
How?
You're the intersection between the
why
and the how, the why and the how, and the why. Yeah. And now and so when you get to the end, and when you get to that intersection, it'll be wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it could be, like, I feel like there's not a lot of people cheering for me, just so you know.
I am.
I know, but religion's sort of over in its corner going, we don't need science, and science over in its corner going, religion's bullshit. And so, like there was a priest, a Jesuit priest, and you may have heard of him, Pierre de Teilhard de Chardin. Okay. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. It's a big French name. And you may have heard of him because some of the futurists many years ago, like Kurzweil and whatnot, jumped on his doctrine. So this guy was a Jesuit priest, okay, a couple hundred years ago. But he was also what we call a natural philosopher, which was the term for science before there was science. So
a natural philosopher.
Yeah, that's what they were called. So he was around Darwin's time. And so he was very much into the sort of whole evolution argument from a science standpoint. So you can imagine what the priests thought of him. Okay. Right. So they were like, that's blasphemy and heresy, and, God's the architect and blah, 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 blah. But then the natural philosophers of the time didn't think he was a real scientist because he was a priest and he preached the word of God and da-da-da-da-da. So nobody owned this guy. Okay. Nobody owned him. He wasn't a real priest. He wasn't a real scientist. So he was sort of in no man's land. So I'm reading some of his writings, and he's written so many things. They're so interesting. When I did my master's, I read a bunch of his writings, and he wrote about this concept that he termed the noosphere, Noosphere. The noosphere comes from the word Gnostic for knowledge. And the way he wrote about it hundreds of years ago, see if this sounds familiar, was an interconnected web of information accessible by all human consciousness.
The internet.
Now this is exactly what I'm talking about. he did not write about the internet. Got me? Because there was no such thing as a computer, much less any of that. He wrote about this concept. Then now we have the internet. We go, oh, Desjardins was writing about the internet. Well, hello, except he was doing it in the 1700s. Do you know what I mean? So there's this concept. And then he writes about another concept of the alpha and the omega coming together. And he pinpoints the point in time. And we would call it the singularity. But again, there was no machine. Do you understand? How could you write about a man-machine interface when there was no such thing as a machine? Didn't exist. The internet, computers didn't exist. So you have to wonder, did the person who ultimately crafted the first internet web type thing, had they been reading his stuff and just finally had the technology to make it happen? Like, so people like me go, where else did that happen?
Mm-hmm. Or where else could it happen? Where else did people write stuff that at the time didn't get published or got overlooked or underappreciated or just cast aside or burned at the stake or whatever, that now with our current understanding of science, look back at it and go, holy shit. And then keep reading, because maybe there's other gem-like objects in the writing that now with our current understanding of science emerges like the blah, 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 the internet or whatever. Just saying. There's a project called, what the hell is it called? It's called the Global Consciousness Project now. But it used to be, was it called that before? But it was for about 40 years. It was run out of a lab in Princeton University by a couple of information nerd geeks. And basically, these were just a bunch of scientists who maybe read Teilhard and said, let's put a bunch of nodes around the world in secure locations and just random number generators and see if there is a field. Let's see if there's a field. And again, based on the same metaphorical writing. So they put these computers, they were literally the old beige plastic computer, like literally like pet computers from the 80s, where they just generate random numbers all day long. All they do is output random numbers. So that's called a random number generator. But they're in secure locations, so like people don't run them over with their cars and get interference from radio towers and whatnot. And so whenever the data would show up as not random, it would correlate to a world event. But it wasn't predictive. So it wasn't psychic. It wasn't like an earthquakeometer. But sometimes it would be a world event like an earthquake would trigger global coherence in the field. And then that would make the random number generators less random because something was pulling them into a pattern of some kind. And so this would happen over and over and over again. And there's tons and tons and tons. There's so much data, it's ridiculous. But there are a few instances in human history where it's so not random, that it's so statistically not random, that you have to ask yourself, like, what the Jesus is going on here, right? Like, and one instance was the day of Princess Diana's death at the time. So some would argue that the world was united in an emotional experience, and that sameness, if you will, of emotion created almost like a magnetic pull for the random number generators. And another significant, you can look this all up, just look it up, you'll find the raw data. Another one was on September 11th, 2001. Okay, so the data deviates so much. And again, you could argue that a couple billion eyeballs and hearts were focused on something, and it was pulling the randomness out of the system and making it more unified. And I always tell this to people, and there's a whole bunch of stuff you can gather from the data. Sometimes I show the data when I'm speaking to CEOs, but
one of the things I always say to people is, just watch the movie Monsters, Inc. Right? So yes, we get lots of energy and excitement and whatever from fear, right? Fear works and powers the electricity, but love and joy and laughter is way stronger, right? So something happens. Humans correlate. That's true. But what are we united in? Is the question. There was another Russian scientist who did his PhD by correlating war and sort of significant human conflict for about 300 years. And sun, what do you call it? Coronal mass ejections and sun activity. Because we've got about 250 to 300 years of data, right? We've been collecting the data for a few hundred years. And all he did was plot human conflict and he plotted sun activity. And then he took the two graphs and he put them one on top of the other, and they were almost carbon copies. So this intense
same time, or was
same time,
or was there a lag? Like
it was pretty close
happened, and
to
then the flare, and then
the flare led the conflict, but not by much, right?
So sorry, the flare was, but it did.
Flare is the incoming energy that humans can't handle, and then the conflict is like a way of discharging, energy you can't handle. It's again a fascinating study. You can Google all this. When you read stuff like that, I just go like, what the heck is going on, right? And so I make up stories, and then I try to like create tools to address them. So in the solar flare story, I go, well, the people on the planet couldn't handle that intense energy, and so they just like chopped each other to pieces, just trying to disperse the energy. But if we could have handled it, would we have still had the conflict, or could we have used that energy to, I don't know, do something more awesome instead of conflict? I don't know. But so this is all sort of there. And like you said earlier, it doesn't matter if you believe it or even understand it.
It's still happening.
Neuroplasticity was still possible 500 years ago. So if somebody had an apoplexy, which is what it would have been called back then, 200-300 years ago, a stroke, they could have taught themselves how to walk again by accident. They could have, right? That's how we discovered neuroplasticity. Somebody was trying to solve a problem, and they put a bunch of steps together, and it worked. And then they did it again, and it worked again. Then they published something, and then you know what I mean? Like, so, but it didn't, our discovery of it didn't herald its first use. It's the noosphere, yes, the internet is the noosphere, but maybe an advanced race is looking at us going, oh my God, these losers use machines instead of their brains.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe in Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's model of reality, it was meant to be a psychic exchange of information.
Or we look back and see they talk about the pyramids being built, and how the hell did we build the pyramids? Maybe it was all psychic energy and we just created it that way.
Who knows? I mean, I don't know.
Again, one of those
too far back for me. So I'm just going to go look a few hundred years back and see if there's anything in the literature, published or unpublished, 200 years ago that might give us insight as to where, like, for example, let's say we could find proof of neuroscientific truths that we take for granted now. There might be other things in there that we're on the verge of trying to explain, that the metaphor might trigger another way of looking at it. Let's take this back to the Sheldon conversation. So there's an episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon is stuck on a problem. He can't figure out how the carbon atoms, something moves through the graphene. He can't figure it out. So he's trying to do what Einstein did and take a mundane job so that he can have an insight.
Right.
And he breaks a bunch of plates working at the Cheesecake Factory because he was trying to be, numb his brain at the time. And he goes, oh, they move like a wave. Like he sees it in the shards. Oh, it moves like a wave. It's not particles. That was and he runs. He has this breakthrough. So where else are there hints of where we could have scientific breakthroughs now written in what we'll call theological or less scientific places, that if someone of scientific ilk would be open-minded enough to look at it, they might go, oh my God, it moves like a wave or whatever. Like, right. So the insight comes from looking in the other system's explanation and vice versa. So let's say you take a theologian who reads a scientific paper and goes, oh my God, that's how God does it. Do you know what I mean? Like but we don't do that enough. And so therefore we're trying to do it. We're trying to come to an understanding of something with no help. And I think the help is in the
collaboration. It's in the collaboration though.
Yeah.
It's in the individual. It's everybody. Humans confuse me. I don't understand why we fight each other so much when we could, if we all just work together. Like, I mean, it sounds like a John Lennon song, right? But
sure,
if we all just work together, wouldn't that make a lot more sense? I think the only thing that's going to bring the human species together as a human species is
don't say it.
I'm saying it, when the aliens show up.
Okay.
I'm saying it. The only thing, like, what else is going to bring us together is that we need a new common enemy. Like,
but that's the old way we've done it.
That's what I mean. Like, that's the old thinking, the old way, right? Like,
yep.
The new way is like seeing that realistically we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Why are we not? And how can we upgrade our programming?
Well, see, I think the answers are already there, and what causes a major shift is when the steps get made explicit. So hypnosis was always hypnosis. It hasn't changed in thousands of years. I mean, I do a history of hypnosis every time I teach it, and it's literally hasn't changed. The process hasn't changed. The people have changed, the understanding has changed, but the process is essentially the same. Now that we understand it and we can explain more of what's happening, whereas before it would have looked more supernatural, now people are less afraid to try. And so they try. It's still the same process. The process hasn't been it's been modernized, but only because it's been turned into steps. It's no longer so-and-so's hand has the power of Thor. Do you know what I mean? It's just the process allows you to access the guarded part of your consciousness and how to get around the guard so that you could replace a program a lot more efficiently.
When you said that, I was going to say, yeah, but having the power of Thor is pretty fucking cool. Like that's like just from a fun, energetic sort of sense. And I just had this kind of a vision of going, maybe that's why we also do it. Cause we like to have the mysterious, like there's something kind of fun and exciting about not really knowing it. And there's this, as opposed to having all the steps. And I'm just moving more into the area of going, why we don't change or why we stick to our old programming. It's like, there must be some purpose to it. In other words, a part of it could be
protective for sure.
Well, protection is one, but entertainment might be the other one. Like it's entertaining to keep ourselves in ignorance. It's like what you said about like the magician. If the magician shows you the trick, it's no longer entertaining anymore.
Exactly.
Meh. But if you don't know about how the trick's done, every time you're like, whoa, that's so cool. So it's entertaining, it's fun, it's exciting. Keeps you in ignorance, but it's still entertaining.
Yeah, well,
what are your thoughts on just that as a, like, I'm kind of going to the reasons why we don't.
Well, again, I like to turn to popular culture because I think the answers are already there. Like in the Matrix, they said, oh, we made the perfect program. You didn't want it. You wanted it to be hard. And then if you understand anything about challenge and failure, is that breakthrough and innovation come when something fails, right? Mm-hmm. So I just watched a podcast that was a bit out there saying, this is the great training ground. And so when you get here, you don't want it to be easy. So you want to forget that everybody has the power of Thor. Do you know what I mean? You want to come in here, you want to forget
Yes.
all that, forget all your thing, and see if you can figure it out. Oh, I want to go tie my hand behind my back. Oh, blindfold me, right? And so we were all at various levels of that. And, there's things like God places the biggest burdens on the strongest shoulders and crap like that. Usually means that we're onto something in humanity's struggle to do what seems so simple, right? And because you have to come to the awareness yourself, you have to want the outcome more than you want things to stay the same. And you have to be willing to do what it takes to get there. It's not complicated, but it is hard for people because the opposing side of the physiology, if you will, is like, is this thing going to eat me or can I eat it? Right? Like, it's protective in nature.
Yes.
So that's the sort of game. And then all the scary monsters that show up in your drama aren't necessarily real. They're sort of real in the Jumanji sense. Like if you watch Jumanji, like the characters in the simulation can be killed, but the upstream characters don't die unless the character dies. It's like a
Dies
whole,
3 times. Yeah. Dies
right?
3 times. Then you actually die. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so this is that, I've had this conversation with people quite often. I said, it seems to me a lot of the times that I feel like I purposefully gave myself amnesia to come down here to experience this world. It just went, I was up there and I went, okay, ready? Give me the pill. It's like like the Matrix. Give me the pill. I'm going to forget, go down there and have some fun. Then when I die, we all show up at the top again and go, oh, Gina, that was fun. You want to do it again? You're like, yeah, Eric, let's do it again. Okay, this time I'll be a chicken and next time you be a snake and you eat me. Okay, great. Go. Boom. You just go back down. But you forget. And now you're just being a chicken and you're being the snake or whatever. Like that concept kind of makes a lot of sense when I start seeing the way we act and behave, when I realize the things that you're talking about, that we are energy. Like I am energy. We're scientifically proving that we're just vibrating energy and that it can change at any time. Well, then, and we have the power, as you said, and this is what you do. And I want to kind of talk about this a little bit more, about the work you do and how you help empower people to unlock that within themselves, that they can start believing again. I like the sign you have right above you. I love the word believe.
Yeah.
And change that you can change yourself. But that where we've done this to ourselves on purpose is to give ourselves amnesia, to come down to experience what we're not. You know what I mean?
Well, look, I mean, I found this hilarious quote somewhere and I put it up in my last training. So it says, you're a ghost driving a meat-coated skeleton made from stardust, riding a rock hurtling through space.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Right. So I just thought that was funny because on the one hand, that's true. And on the other hand, it's very real, right? Like the chocolate cake is very real. It's very real. And so you have to balance that. And what I try to flip people's minds with is, what you call your problem is actually the accelerated answer of where to change the program to change reality rapidly, right? Whatever the problem is the broken program. It's not something wrong with you or them or the government or whatever. It's just the broken program. And so if you, instead of engaging with the 3D world and blaming it or being at its effect, just take it like, okay, the problem is the program that got me to this. So I've just got to replace that one. Okay, replace it, and that will be a different experience of reality. And so, gee, Gina, that sounds a bit out there. Okay, well, watch Life is Beautiful, read A Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, these were extreme situations where people did exactly that. They changed their programming, didn't change the circumstances, and had a very different experience of a concentration camp or of the war or whatever. Same meat, coded skeleton, different program, different experience. So look, I'd love to be able to change people's circumstances, but I'm not even sure if I would, because, you know, if you help a dragonfly emerge from its shell, emerge from its little bug shell, its little exoskeleton, it won't live. It won't make it, because it has to struggle its way out and flex its body and get its wings out and let them dry. It has to do all that, or it doesn't have the developmental resources it needs to survive. Well, then would you change people's circumstances if you saw them as a dragonfly, you know, emerging into their dragonflyedness? And would you help them knowing it would actually not serve them? It would shorten their little dragonfly life. And what I always say to people is, you could witness them doing that and cheer them on from the sideline and maybe prevent the bird from eating them while they're struggling. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But you know, the bottom line is that dragonfly's got to get itself out of that exoskeleton. And, you know, or let's use the more common caterpillar butterfly analogy. People always say that, oh, just remember that a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. I want to be a butterfly. And I go, yeah, do you really? Because caterpillars have to liquefy.
I know, they have to like dissolve down into
straight goo phase. Like, so do you really want to be a butterfly? Then if you do, why are you complaining about the goo phase?
Yeah.
It's the goo phase. Why are you complaining? It's just the goo phase. Right? Butterflies next Monday. But in order to become an actual butterfly, the actual caterpillar has to die. But interesting question. Does the caterpillar die because the caterpillar becomes a butterfly? So the consciousness is retained. So what up with that?
It's the ghost wearing a different meat sack.
Right? So, but it does have to liquefy, and that cannot feel, I don't care who you are, the liquefaction of a caterpillar has to feel terrible to the caterpillar. There's no way that feels good.
Because it's you're actually experiencing a death. And I think that's the ultimate programming, is to avoid death. That's the human programming, to avoid death. It's all about avoiding death. And how do we maintain the species? How do we propagate it? And it's like every behavior is all based on survival. Like, it pretty well is all based on, will this eat me or can I eat it? Like what you said again. Yeah. You know, and so if someone's in the state and they're in the gelatinous state, they're the caterpillar and they're in the goo, we're in the tearing down part. You do the work that you do is you don't change the process for them. You change their
resources,
their perception of what's happening. So they realize it's part, like they change the way they look at the world. So the world they look at changes, not physically changes, because they're still a chrysalis and they're still gooing down, but you can be more joyful in the process of becoming a butterfly.
No, let's face it. Goo phase has got to suck shit. So we actually shorten it. Right. So the reason why.
Okay. So that's what I'm trying to get.
Yeah. So
what's the power?
Well, the goo phase, if you're looking at my little diagram over here, between point B and point C would be hell, or the goo phase.
Yes.
Right? Point B is when you realize you want to be a butterfly. Point C is when you become a butterfly. Right. Between B and C is that sort of dissolution of the caterpillar. And most people extend that process because they're like, they don't want to move forward because it's unknown. They want to go back to the way it was, but they can't really. And so they spend all this time, and it's all this time in between phases. And that's painful.
It's like purgatory. I've often said that to people, put me in heaven or hell, I don't care, but don't leave me in purgatory.
Yeah, it's painful. So it's like rip the band. So essentially what a breakthrough does is it rips the Band-Aid off instead of pulling it off one arm hair at a time, right? So rip the Band-Aid off, get the caterpillar body, and then from point C to point D is learn to move the new caterpillar body till you're like a fully functioning, or not caterpillar, butterfly, till you're a fully functioning butterfly, right? So, you know, point C gets you the wings, and then point D, you're flying around and you're a full-fledged butterfly.
Okay.
But most people spend time resisting the gooification phase. They say they want to change, but then they don't do what's required to change. And so they kind of go back to caterpillar, back to caterpillar, back to caterpillar. Okay, I want to be a butterfly. Okay, back to caterpillar. Okay, back. And so they spend more time in the, like you said, purgatory, instead of just get through it, delete the programs, install the new programs. And now what are you? You're a butterfly. Okay, go fly around the block 50 times. And on your 50th time, then you'll be a full-fledged butterfly.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of that goo phase right now. I'm in, and it sucks. It's like the shadow, the dark, the gooey, and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, going like, how is this trip been unnecessarily long?
Probably.
Yeah. So then how do I break that? How do I get it quicker? That's what you do, right?
Call me.
That's my good. And where would people call you?
Well, we're moving. So I think probably the best way is just email me, gina@greatnessgroup.com.
Okay. Yeah, because you're moving. So now you're not going to be doing in person.
Oh, yeah, we still are. It's just going to look a bit different than it has.
Okay. So because
I'm not going to stop working. I am going to be a lot more selective. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Okay. Are you going to be doing any live workshops in the UK?
Probably still do them in Canada and the US, just because that's where our business is. But I don't know. Honestly, don't know the answer to these questions. We are still running our current calendar the way it's been published. Like we're not changing that, because the dates of running those courses are outside of term time, right? So like when you go to school, there's term time and then there's not term time, right? So I can still run them. It's just requires me to get on an airplane. Well, that's no different than what I normally do anyways. But with respect to moving to doing more, probably not. And the number of private clients I take will be very selective, right? Which it usually is anyway, but it will be just a bit more of an ordeal, so that it truly is the people who are motivated. I'm not in the business of convincing. No one needs this. So we're clear. Yeah. All it does is accelerate things. And that's not always a good thing. You have to really want to go quickly from one to the other and be willing to, as you said earlier, get in touch with that power that's within. But then that also means you have to be more responsible, because now you have a power. And so now you have to, so it's not for everybody, but I do want to try to find the people who are like, okay, enough. Like, I spent enough time. They're slightly impatient people, and somewhat uncomfortable in their sort of relative gooification. And they've tried a number of things, and it's going too slowly, or they just don't have the right process. And so it feels very magical. Whereas my outcome feels magical, but my process is very linear.
You've basically been just describing me right there. We've talked about that too.
We did.
It's a very gooification process going on for me right now.
And sometimes that is what provides the motivation. So don't villainize the goo, because sometimes you need to, think, if we're just going to go with the goo metaphor, sometimes you need to melt the attachment, right? So you have to, the cost of it really has to come to the surface. And until the cost comes to the surface, you live under the illusion that you're giving up more than you stand to gain. But that's not the case. Yeah. It's just, Michael Beckwith said, pain pushes until vision pulls. So I believe once you become the butterfly, then your vision should pull you along, because you once you go through that rite of passage, and that it didn't destroy you and it made you stronger, and you have a process, then doing it again and again and again and again becomes fun, because you've reframed what it means, right? You've triumphed. And so that's why whenever I work with someone, they're often shocked, because it's like, I don't know what current coaches do, but for me, if my client's like a super go getter or whatever, we do the breakthrough and they're just off and running. I never need to talk to them again, unless they want to, but it's not required, because, teach a man to fish. So once they get through it, they should be able to do that for any other process that comes up in life, because they've learned the process through the process. And then they could. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have clients who come back and tweak this and tweak that, for sure, but it's not a requirement. So it's like, 2.5 days done. And for some people that are short on time, right, and long on money, that's the trade-off, right? And then we also, but the thing, like everybody, oh, Gina, I don't have the money for that. Okay, well, we also teach it. I don't hold anything back when I teach, the entrepreneurs, the peak performers, and the people who coach them. When we teach in the classrooms of Greatness U, we teach the process that I use, and I don't hold anything back. So we DIY it, right? If you're longer on time and shorter on money, we'll teach you how to do it yourself, right? And it still works because it's a process of desire and willingness. So, it's not like I'm sitting in the corner like going, oh my God, I have this power.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to call me. And if you don't call me, you're never going to get to experience this. Well, no, that's ridiculous. In fact, you could just change and you wouldn't need me at all. But humans tend to like to hang on to the way it was.
We had, because the last week session you had planned out, I was looking at going and I was like, don't, and it's like, didn't cross time wise.
It's okay.
But this is where that I want the listener to, this has been a fantastic podcast. I want the listener to really, I think it would be one of those ones you got to listen to multiple times. I'd like to re-listen to my podcast as well, because I get so much out of it. I listen to it again and what my guests have shared. I'm like, holy crap, this is going to be one of those 2 or 3 time listeners podcasts that for the listener out there who's listening or watching the podcast, know that I think ultimately there is a way out, is what I think what I'm hearing you saying, is that there is hope and there is a way out. Mm-hmm. There is a system and a process to do.
Beat me up, Scotty. See, we've already depicted all the truisms of human development and evolution. They're already there. Those of us who are doing the work to enable others or help others just are putting steps to it. The more steps you have, the more replicatable it is. The more replicatable it is, the more people you can offer it to, right? But you could just as easily keep it secret and magic in the corner and make it snapping your fingers, and that would work too. So all I'm on a mission to do is see if we could find steps that people could follow that make it easier than the people that went before them. And here's what I'll say, we're still early on in this journey. Let's do a podcast every year and I can update you on how the research is going.
Oh, right? That was a whole part. Yes. Thank you for bringing me back to stage 1. Yeah. The reason why I wanted to do part 2 is to go deeper into this topic, but ultimately to go, hey, here's this new phase that you're going into. You're starting this PhD research paper. I wanted to set the stage to say, okay, here you go. This is what you're going to do.
We'll see.
Definitely. Yeah. But this is what your plan is to go do, is to get the connection between the why, the how and the why. So we get the wow. Yeah. And I definitely want to make sure that we revisit, and I want to get updates on where you're at and what the new breakthroughs that you've had, because I think this is when you told me, I went, this is so fucking cool.
It is.
I'm so excited for you and I'm cheering, and I want to know how it's going, and I want to participate wherever I can.
So. I will keep you posted. I promise.
Okay. Awesome. Well, there you go, everybody. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me again. We'll see you next time you come to Toronto.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, everyone. Keep exploring.
Thanks for listening to the Viking Academy podcast. Make sure to leave us your honest feedback by leaving a review on Apple or Spotify, and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.